Hey folks, welcome back to Judaication here on JNS TV. My name is Josh Hasten, correspondent for JNS News. We are in the JNS Media Hub in the heart of Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. Thanks so much for joining us on this program where we break down the realities of the situation in Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. It is truly an honor to have a good friend of mine on the show this week. Gedaliah Blum is a dedicated advocate for Israel, committed to strengthening the Jewish people's presence in their ancestral homeland. He is the founder of something called Heartland Initiative, an international public diplomacy platform building bridges between Israel and global allies. Gedaliah, it's really an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. And, you know, usually when we do podcasts in the Judean Roundtable, we would have a little whiskey, some cigars, but we're in your new beautiful studios. We can't smoke it out here, huh?
No, just water. We're not bringing any food or drinks into the studio. Brand new here, the JNS Media Hub. But it's great to have you on all the way
being here, Josh.
From Elie and Binyamin, which is basically the southern Shomron, southern Samaria. Talk about your community of Elie.
Well, first, I would just want to say first, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I have such nachat for you and Alex and the whole team of JNS. Because you guys are the ones who are doing things with the passion and not worrying about everything else. You have a focus and a direction, and you've been pushing, and all of this stuff is just falling around you. I know it's hard work, but you're beautiful studios, and I wish you only the best of luck and continued growth. Because
Amen.
We all need you. We need you.
Thank you so much.
Elie,
the beautiful community of Elie.
So Elie is situated between the ancient capital of Shiloh and the modern capital of the Shomron, Ariel. And we have like 7 different hills, 22 kilometers of roads, the most beautiful sunsets in all of the country, hiking trails. I mean, it's Gan Eden. It's such a beautiful place to raise kids.
Paradise, you're saying?
It's paradise. It's amazing. The people are amazing. In fact, you know, during the war, when the war started, I found myself really the only man who stayed on the street because everybody else went and they're in combat. And unfortunately, out of about 40 homes, we've actually lost three of our soldiers from our street alone, whom I've known since they were like 8, 9 years old. So it's a kind of community that is doesn't live in a bubble, and they're actually taking initiative and being part of the development and the security of the country.
I want to get back to Elie a little bit later, but first let's talk about your initiative, your latest initiative. You've been involved in many, many things over the years, promoting Israel to the world, really getting Israel's message out there. The Heartland Initiative, tell us what it is. What is this all about?
So the Heartland Initiative is a public diplomacy platform, which essentially means like it's very small and lean. And thank God I have amazing supporters, financial supporters. It is a nonprofit. And what I've seen is that there's a vacuum that it needed to be filled, which is we needed to create more unity within the pro-Israel camp, whether it be Jews, Christians, it doesn't matter if it's Israel around the world. A lot of them end up in their own silos. So my work is about creating, finding partners who share the same lighthouse of securing the Jewish people in the land of Israel, securing the state of Israel, building bridges and helping them and bringing them together and giving them resources and my time and my network and creating more of an ecosystem so people are able to work together. You know, it's not enough just to take 2 people who lead 2 organizations and say, you know, you guys really get along and you guys are doing great work. Why don't you guys sit down together? They sit down together and then they go back to their work and they're busy doing their own thing. Sometimes it needs somebody to come in and like really manage the time and manage the meetings and make sure that things are moving forward. So I'm really doing amazing. I think the work that I'm doing is amazing because my partners are amazing, and I'm finding other organizations that are doing, you know, sharing the same lighthouse that we have.
Talk specifically how this relates to Judea and Samaria. You did call it the Heartland Initiative for a reason. As I've said on the show many times, Judea and Samaria is the biblical heartland of the Jewish people dating back 3,000 years, ancient times, modern times, the history, our connection to the land. How is Heartland Initiative connected to those communities in Judea and Samaria?
So the Heartland Initiative was really created, again, for the international public diplomacy platform, bringing officials to Israel and having interactions with their counterparts here in Israel. But when it comes to government agencies, they don't bring these guests to Judea and Samaria. So you look at the map of, let's say, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it doesn't include Judea and Samaria. Is on a personal level, they want to do stuff more with Judea and Samaria, but they have to deal with the politics of, okay, one guest, you're going to bring, let's say, the Czech president to Shiloh, who would probably be happy to come. But then the next day you have to deal with some ambassador of such and such, whatever country of who's not so friendly with us. So a lot of times they're just kind of like taking a step back. So for me, that was a vacuum that needed to be filled. We needed to get officials to Judea and Samaria, but not only Judea and Samaria. And this is actually a big flip of my mindset that I realize that we can't only focus on Judea and Samaria. Like, it's enough. You go to a doctor and you hurt your leg and you say, okay, you have to pay attention to one leg. That became Judea and Samaria. We have to pay attention to Judea and Samaria. But the idea at the end of the day is to walk normally with both legs. So we have to normalize Judea and Samaria with the rest of the country. So really, the Heartland Initiative, yes, we do have an emphasis on Judea and Samaria, but we also work with everybody. We work in the South, we work in the North, we work with Christians, Druze, Muslims, everybody. But it's all connected to everybody who shares the same lighthouse, that a strong Israel must and always be a whole Israel, with Judea and Samaria as part of an integral part of the state of Israel.
Give an example maybe of a recent guest you've brought here to Israel and opened their eyes as to the realities of the situation, whether it is Judea and Samaria or the entire country, as you just mentioned.
So it's interesting. So I'm not coming to open up people's eyes, right? I'm not bringing people to open up people's eyes. What I'm doing is I'm bringing people over who already have their eyes open, but they don't know what to do. That's the biggest problem with our advocacy. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be a fight. There should be a fight against our detractors, the liars, the propagandists, the jihadists, everybody who's saying that Jews don't belong in Judea and Samaria, whatever. But there's also a very silent majority of people, millions, hundreds of millions of people throughout the world who say, I pray for Israel all the time. I love Israel, especially the Christians. I love Israel. I pray, I teach my kids the story of the Bible. Okay, what else do you do? No, that's it. I'm like, it's not enough. Like, God, it's actually different. It's actually, I'm having conversations with Christians and saying, like, listen, God didn't make this world perfect. You think God is perfect. God is perfect, but he didn't make the world perfect. He put us in the world in order to make it better. He made wheat so we can make bread. He made grapes so we can make wine, right? God gave us 2 hands and 2 arms to affect change where we can. And I'm trying to push the Christians who are generally saying, like, I'm just going to pray. No, let's get moving. Let's do something together. So when I bring people to Israel, Judea and Samaria, we try to start building these relationships, and whether it be a follow-up with educational opportunities or cultural or political backing. And that's a key part, I think, in our public diplomacy that's missing.
Amazing. I also want to turn to another one of the projects which you initiated years ago, I believe. It's called Dapei Katom, or literally translated as the orange pages. Basically, the yellow pages promoting business in Judea and Samaria. It's an entire guide, a listing online, maybe offline as well.
It's online.
Just online.
Yeah.
Listing those businesses so people can know where they can support businesses, where they can get good service at different companies throughout Judea and Samaria. Talk about that initiative also.
Listen, the BDS movement was our trigger to open up the orange pages, Dapei Katom, because the BDS movement knew, or I'm sorry, not even the BDS movement, the people who are the jihadists, the far left wing, the Nazis, whatever you want to call them, the Jew haters, they knew that how do you go after people? You hit them economically. It's a weapon. You could weaponize economics by boycotting, divestment, and sanctions. And so in 2009, I said, if they're using a weapon to attack us, why don't we use the same weapon to strengthen us? Again, going back to the silent majority of people, how do we activate people who support us? Is give them opportunities. So all I did it's very simple. I said, you don't like the way that we're being treated? Then do something about it in a normal way, an everyday way. You need to hire a plumber? Hire one from Beit-El. If you want to buy a refrigerator, look local, look in Gush Etzion. If you want a lawyer, we should hire lawyers from Judea and Samaria, accountants, anything, going out to restaurants, tourism. Just look at Judea and Samaria first. We need to, again, normalize this relationship. It's not a charity. Don't oh, go to Judea and Samaria because they really need to be strong. And yes, that's the product of a strong economy, more investment, more jobs, more building, more businesses opening up. If a business owner, if a prospective business owner sees that Judea and Samaria is open for business, it's a good place to do business, they're going to open up new companies and hire more. I just want to give you a statistic real quick.
Sure.
There's 100,000 families in Judea and Samaria, Jewish families in Judea and Samaria. There's 10,000 businesses. That's 10% of every single household on average that has a small business that is part of their livelihood.
Right.
And that's not even including their employees. We're talking about a huge opportunity for real ribbonut, for real sovereignty, which I call economic Zionism. Like, we need to go from the bottom up and not rely only on our politicians or the Americans to give us permission to have sovereignty. Sovereignty comes from how we live every single day. And I hope that Dapei Katom is just one of many tools that people could utilize in order to move in that direction.
At the same time, you've been extremely active, especially over the last few months on social media, putting out videos, sharing the realities of the situation, exposing the myths of what they call the occupation, apartheid, and whatnot. I want to turn to one of your videos here. We're going to play a clip here. Let's play the clip with the Jeopardy music in the background. So in that clip, you're driving around, you stop at a house, a huge mansion, and you ask the question, is this mansion A, Disney World, B, Beverly Hills, or C, is this a house under the Palestinian Authority? So let's leave it for just 1 second. I want to play one more video where you highlight what you call the Beverly Hills of the Palestinian Authority.
So I'm driving past what they call the Beverly Hills within the Palestinian Authority. These are mega mansions. These are beautiful homes. You'll never see it on CNN because, of course, they have to be seen as victims and living under occupation, under the threat with oppression and all the other things that go along with it. But I just want to say that most of the people who live in this Beverly Hills type area are American citizens that don't live here full time. They only come here in the summer. So they spend their summers, which is really interesting, from one of the freest countries in the world, America, to the quote-unquote the most oppressive state in the world, under Israeli occupation and under threat of genocide. But they come here in their summer vacations. Is there any other place in the world that would ever have such a crazy narrative?
So now that the viewers have seen both clips, you at that mansion and you driving the roads, exposing the lies of the apartheid and occupation, I want you to talk about those clips and also about the fact that you've been so active over the last several months, exposing the BDS haters, the liars, those who accuse Israel of occupation and apartheid.
So for these videos, number one is that it's really hard to drive around the streets, live in Samaria, Binyamin, drive through Gush Etzion and Judea, and see with my own eyes, as you know, the reality on the ground. But we see it all the time, when we're just like, okay, another Mercedes, definitely not Jewish, right? Mm-hmm. If you see a Mercedes, the first thing in your mind is what? It's Arab.
Yeah. Like
luxury cars, Arab.
BMWs.
They're not Jewish. They're not Jewish cars. And so the narrative that's being told on in the media is such a microcosm of the reality of what's going on. I'm not saying there aren't poor and poor Arabs living in certain places, but I could also do a documentary about Jews who live in poverty and say, look how all the Jews live, and that's not a reality. So that's the way it's being framed, and I'm just trying to open up a window. I'm simply trying to open up a window and trying to be a little cheeky about it, being a little funny about it, and because we have enough serious people in this world, and I just want it to be a little more light and a little more palatable when it comes to culturally sharing and things like this. So it's actually been very well. It's been very successful. I mean, like you said, I just kind of started social media again recently, and I already have 1 million impressions in the last 30 days.
Wow.
It's crazy because the content I'm making is things that people don't see. And for me, it's every day. And I think that it's very important to be able to tell this story, not because we have to defend ourselves, and not because I'm necessarily trying to fight other people online. I'm not even directing my attention to them. Again, it's to the silent majority of people. I think overall, my biggest message, if I could ever say anything to anybody who's pro-Israel, whatever, is to stop fighting so much. You're being distracted. It's like you're building this huge building, and then somebody comes and starts whispering in your ear, like, oh, you maybe move the wall that way. Maybe, oh, why are you doing the walls yellow? And they're yelling at you. Why are you building it there? And you're like you're not building your building. Like, ignore this person, build your building, and let's focus on winning instead of trying to focus on fighting these very loud, minority of people who really should be irrelevant.
So go check out Gedaliah's videos on social media, Facebook, and all the other platforms. You also recently penned an op-ed featured on JNS talking about the spiritual and cultural battle, namely the attack on Judeo-Christian values, where different ideologies are able to work together. You have extremists on both sides, the radical Islamists aligning with the woke in the United States on college campuses. Those two usually wouldn't be in the same room because they are exact opposites of the spectrum. Talk about the op-ed you penned for JNS.
So this is, I believe, is probably the most important message that anybody should internalize. I actually understood a lot of these concepts about faith-based diplomacy and connecting when I first sat down and watched a screening of this new film called Tragic Awakening that was directed by Wayne Coupling from South Africa. It was produced by Rabbi Raphael Shor,
yes,
and Rabbi Shalom Schwartz. That was also featured with Rawan Osman from Syria, an Arab woman. The premise of this film, and this goes into the op-ed because the op-ed was reflective of this. The premise of this film is this. Moses went to Mount Sinai 3,500 years ago and received the Torah, right? We all know this.
Sure.
It wasn't just the Torah. It was a new world order. It was a new world order that challenged the levers of power that existed back then, that still exist today. So when you're seeing, for instance, these Islamists lining with the woke, and you're like, how does that make sense? How does lesbians for Palestine make any sense? Bibi Netanyahu was up and speaking in front of Congress, a joint house, and said it's like chicken for KFC, right? But it does make sense. It makes absolute sense. And the reason is this, because this new world order, it's called Judean Christian values, which is what Western civilization was built upon, what made the most successful and prosperous civilizations in the history of the world was based on these values: personal property, personal responsibility, freedom of expression, all these different things that we may take advantage of. We may not think about so much everyday life in the Western world, but the Islamists are against it. It's a threat to their power structure. Wokeism, there's no room for wokeism within Judean Christian values, because if they're able to upend our value system, it puts them in a place of normalization. You understand? So that's why you have these people who are, let's say, for instance, according to Judean Christian values, let's say LGBT community is not mainstream. They're not normalized, but they want to be normalized. So how do you do it? You're not going to convince the people who built their value system of Judean Christian values. You're going to have to upend the whole thing, and then you're going to have to go in. So you have these bedfellows. You have the Islamists, you have the wokeism, you have the communism. They're all working together against Israel because we represent Judean Christian values. So I tell my Christian friends around the world, in America, in Africa, and in Europe, the people I work with, I say, don't tell me you're standing with Israel because you love Israel. There's no difference. They're only fighting us. They don't really care about Jews. It's what we represent. And what we represent, you've adopted within your own communities, in your own culture. They're going against both of us. So don't stand for Israel, stand with Israel, because you're next. First they go after the Saturday people, then they go after the Sunday people, and that's real. That's a real thing. And we're facing a significant cultural war right now throughout the world. And again, I keep going back to Africa because I'm working a lot with African leaders. They are facing significant threat against their Judean Christian values, because they're opening up the door to Islamism, communism. The Chinese are there, the Iranians are there, and they're being bought out and sold out, and the people they have no idea what's going on. So that's what the op-ed is essentially about. Is about what exactly is Judean Christian values, where does it come from, and who's threatened by it. And when you see who's anti-Israel around the world, you see very clearly those people the countries and cultures that don't prescribe to this new world order that Moshe brought down on Har Sinai. It's the Islamism, it's everything else.
Go to jns.org and check out Gedaliah's latest op-ed. You will not be disappointed. At the same time, if I can get personal with you, just taking a step back, I want to talk about your journey to Israel. If I recall, you were on a Birthright trip and weren't so affiliated, didn't know much about Zionism, Israel, Judaism, and correct me if I'm wrong, but here you are, I think it's been, 10, 15 years later, if not more, on the front lines fighting Israel's public diplomacy battles. Just talk about your personal story for a few minutes if you can.
Josh, when I was a senior in college, I was living with 3 other guys in the dirtiest townhouse you could ever imagine. It was like Hollywood, Animal House kind of thing.
Which college were you at?
Rowan University in Glassboro, New Jersey.
Okay, never heard of that. But
I got a call from Birthright because I had applied for a free trip. No affiliation with really Judaism or Israel, but I wanted to travel. I don't even think I had my passport at the time. But like they were giving out, I heard an advertisement on the radio giving out free trips to Israel, so I signed up. And the woman called me up. I'm standing in my dirty kitchen, beer cans everywhere. It must have been whatever. And she's like, listen, I have tens of thousands of people I need to call because that's how many people applied to Birthright. This was the first trip, by the way.
Wow.
It didn't exist before. This is 1999. And she said, I have one question for you and I have to leave. Why do you want to go to Israel? So I said to her, listen, I said, when I was 8 years old, my bubby passed away. My grandmother passed away, and I was very close to her. And I knew that she was the only one with my aunt to ever go to Israel. No one else in my whole family has never been to Israel for 2,000 years. And so I told this woman on the phone, as I got older, I asked my aunt how the trip was for Bubby. And she said it changed her life. And I said to this woman, I said, she went to Israel 2 years before she passed away. She goes, really? I said, yeah. I said, listen, I know 2 things why I want to come to Israel. I know 2 things. I said, I'm for sure going to come to Israel. It's either now with you or 2 years before I die. I also know another thing is that I also know it's going to change my life. So better now than later. And she just was crying on the phone.
Wow.
She was crying. So I got a spot on the one spot out of 25, and there was thousands of people that applied for it, and it changed my life. It not only changed my life, but I realized that I didn't want to follow in the footsteps, although I'm grateful for my family and my parents, but the corporate life, I didn't want to follow in the footsteps. And I know you could probably agree with that. We're not following the footsteps of our parents. We're like blazing our own trail and doing different things. And I think that's why we connect so well. But I've not only changed my life, but I feel like there's a mission for me to change other people's lives and pick up the pen and write history that my grandchildren would read about and learn about in history class. So that's it in a nutshell. And of course, then maybe like a couple of years later, I got married to my wife Elie Sheva, who had a family here already, and we live in Ailey now. We have 8 kids, and I'm dealing with every single thing that I deal with work, whether it be private business or whether it be the nonprofit world. It's everything must have 2 things. It must strengthen Israel and strengthen the Jewish people. And I feel like I have so much purpose and drive to wake up in the morning and say, what am I doing today? And it's an amazing experience.
That's an amazing Birthright story, certainly a success story from Birthright, and the fact that you were selected out of thousands. It's all bashert, as they say, meant to be. But I wanted you to talk about, you brought up your wife, your 8 kids living in Elie, just north of Jerusalem, maybe about an hour or so from Jerusalem. You described it at the beginning. Talk a little bit more just about what life is like in Elie. You described, unfortunately, Elie was really hit hard in terms of those who were killed fighting for the state of Israel since October the 7th, people you knew personally. But in addition to the sad realities of the situation, talk about the joy and the beauty of the community and what it's like to live there.
So when I grew up, there was this saying like, finders keepers, losers weepers, right?
Sure.
And society was pretty much about the me, and it's developed even worse, where people are looking for, what are my rights, right? I want this, I want that. It's my right to have this, my right to have that. And that's not the language that's being spoken in Elie. The language that's spoken in Elie is like, what is my obligation? What's my obligation to my family, my children, my community, my people, my country? And I'll just give an example. We have 40 houses just on our neighborhood. And there's like, I couldn't even tell you the levels of rank of high-level officers. I don't even know what they call it. The falafel they have. There's like 45 falafel on our street. My next door neighbor, this is a cool story. My next door neighbor, after October 7th, he was in reserve duty, and he couldn't go to war right away. Why? Even though he was a commander of thousands of troops and was involved in a lot of different logistics things, they needed him. Why didn't he show up? Because he had donated a kidney 2 weeks before, and he was still recovering. So against the doctor's orders, on October 15th or whatever, he just got in his car and he went up north and he's been gone for over 380 days.
Wow.
Just the other day, I walked up he's right next door to me. I walked up my steps from the street. We're on a different level. And I look at my yard and I'm like, oh my God, I have no time. I have a business. I have a nonprofit. I have 8 kids. I'm married. How do I do my yard? It's like a mess. And then I turn to him, his yard. And I'm like, I can't say anything. The guy's been gone for 380 days, whatever, 307 days. And I'm like, I got to do something about this. So I went on social media and I put out this call. I said, listen, my neighbor is not poor. He could afford it. He's just not here. His wife is working. They have kids. It's a mess. His business is suffering. His home life is suffering. Everything is suffering. Thank God he's healthy. But I'm like, wouldn't it be so nice if we all just chipped in and I hired a gardener to do his whole lawn?
Wow.
So when he comes home one day every 3 weeks, that he doesn't have to think about how I thought when I have the time. Like, oh my God, so that actually right now, as we're sitting here, the gardener is working on the garden right now. But that's Elie. That's Elie. We live in a bubble, but we don't live in a bubble. It's very like Rav Cookish. It's like, again, God gave us 2 hands and 2 arms. You need to affect change. We don't live in a shtetl. We're not living in a ghetto. We have an obligation to not only our community, but our country and the world.
That's certainly inspiring. And I want to turn now to the war, which Israel is still fighting on 7 different fronts. I want to know your thoughts on how the war is going, specifically in Gaza. And are you concerned, and I ask this to a lot of my guests, are you concerned about the situation from a security perspective in Judea and Samaria? Do you think another, God forbid, October 7th style massacre is possible in Judea and Samaria? Is that something that's keeping you up at night?
Wow. Okay. So as far as the Gaza war is concerned, it's a very sensitive subject.
Why is that?
Because we have hostages there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't purport to speak against or for the parents and the families of the hostages. But I will say this from a strategic point of view, and I'm not a military expert, but it's obvious. October 7th or 8th, we should have been fighting the war like there was no hostages. I'm sorry, like that's very insensitive. I would never say that directly to a family member because they have their own perspective. And if I was them, I would be doing exactly the same thing, fighting for whatever political solution there is to get our family out. But the price tag went through the roof for each of the hostages. And we know now Hamas is not going to give up the only cards that they have in their hand. This is it.
Right.
Once the hostages are back with us, they have nothing. This is their lifeline. So the hostages and going after them is not helping. We need to proceed with the war, unfortunately, like there's no hostages. As far as Judea and Samaria is concerned, as far as the security is concerned, listen, I'm talking from a layman. I live there. I'm involved in some, boosting of the community security through my work. But listen, what we learned from October 7th is that we can't let October 6th happen ever again. We always have to assume that it could happen. We always have to be ready that an October 7th type incursion into our communities can happen and will happen. If it will happen, it won't happen if we think it will happen. It will happen if we think that it won't happen. Just like this is the lesson of October 6th, because as much as we want to think that quiet equals peace, sometimes quiet equals planning, and we can't be on our heels. So with the communities of Judea and Samaria, and I know there's a lot of organizations that are doing amazing work. As you know, the One Israel Fund is securing, but they're filling the gap from what the country should be doing.
Right.
And it's not enough. I wish that this organization would be $100 million organization, but it's not. And but that's the type of capital that needs to be invested into the country. And this also goes along with sovereignty, because once we realize, once there's consensus that Judea and Samaria is an integral part of the state of Israel, then all bets are off. We have to go full steam ahead. We have to secure our people. That's it. Right now, it's like, well, you're there. It's your fault if it happens. In fact, I actually I speak to a lot of people on the left wing and on the left, and one of them said, "Thank God that October 7th happened in the Gaza area, because if it actually happened in Judea and Samaria, we would have all said, well, they deserved it. What do you expect that they live there?" It's crazy.
I've heard that. That's very, very harsh, but
it's true. And they were being honest, and they weren't being it in a way of. They realized, by the way, the only reason why they're saying this is because after October 7th, their consciousness changed. A lot of them don't want to see two states anymore. They're not lefties anymore when it comes to that. They're still warm and kind people, but they're not naive anymore. They don't think anymore that everybody's good. They realize that evil does exist, and we need to stamp it out as early as possible. And that also includes within Judea and Samaria, we have to secure our communities, not only defensively, but we need to be offensive.
We're almost out of time, but I want one last question here, going back to public diplomacy. People are watching this now. How do you think they could make a real difference from wherever people are watching, anywhere around the world, in Israel's public diplomacy efforts, whether it's through the Heartland Initiatives or just in general? What can people do to get involved on behalf of the state of Israel?
So first and foremost, don't do public diplomacy if that's not your thing. If you're a baker and you want to bake cupcakes with a Israel flag on it, then do that. If you're a lawyer and you want to volunteer pro bono to some organizations, then do that. Figure out what your superpower is and figure out how to apply your superpower to something that strengthens Israel and the Jewish people, because we can't all fit in the same mold. Everybody's got to find their own space. And what we learned is, by the way, after October 7th, there's a lot of lessons that we learned after October 7th. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned, and I think a lot of other people learned, is that you cannot rely on the institutions of government. We have to only rely on ourselves. And again, God gave us two hands and two arms. We need to be able to do what we can in order to affect change. And again, everybody counts. And whatever people could do on their own, what their superpower is, don't do it quietly either. Not because of ego. Don't boost your ego and say, look what I'm doing. But say, look what I'm doing. I'm just a simple person. Inspire other people to do the same. And I think that's what people could do for Israel, is just do what you could do, but do it. Commit. That's it.
That's great advice. Before we go, Gedaliah Blum, any last words here? Heartland Initiative, Dapei Katom, any last thing you want to share with the viewers?
Just, I love JNS.
That's awesome.
You guys are amazing. and you guys are like family. And I just really, anything, just blessings and success, because this is something that hopefully at some point you grow in scale much greater than Al Jazeera, because we know that there's a war going on of information, and you guys are right now the spearhead of what is everything is right and true, what's going on in Israel, the real story, the clear story, and we need to just amplify your messages, your platform, your megaphone. We need a bigger megaphone.
I really appreciate that. And for the record, I did not tell him to say that. This was not something we talked about before, so I really, really appreciate that.
Do I get
so much?
Do I get the mug?
I'm gonna have to talk to the production team after the show. But I want to thank you so much, Gedaliah Blum, Heartland Initiative, Dapei Katom, and so much more. It's really an honor to have you on the show today. This has been another edition of Judaication here on JNS TV. My name is Josh Hasten, correspondent for JNS News. I want to thank the production team behind the scenes: Ryan Lifshitz, Esther Eden, Yuri Svertsky, Zach Sickerman, and Timur David Aklin. Make sure you keep it locked into JNS TV on YouTube for all the amazing content, and go to jns.org for all the latest breaking news from Israel, the Middle East, and the entire Jewish world, coming to you from Jerusalem at the JNS Media Hub, the eternal capital here of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. Shalom to everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you on next week's show.